Call-in during Washington Journal at 7 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN. Next, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, speaking at a Get Out the Vote rally in support of Democratic California Representative Barbara Lee, who's running for re-election in California's 13th Congressional District.
In the country now. I want to thank you. Let me take just a moment first and thank you so much for being here. But I want to just take a moment to mention and think about what we're facing in terms of this unfortunate act of gun violence and toxic hate. Our hearts go out to those families, the Tree of Life Synagogue and its congregation, to the people of Pittsburgh, to all of the residents for this despicable act this morning. But you know what? We must recommit ourselves to fighting for gun control legislation. Okay, we've got to do that. We must break up the stronghold of the NRA and let them know enough is enough. And yes, we must demand that our elected officials stand up to the gun lobby and put people first. Put people first. What a tip. So let me thank our mayor for welcoming us to Berkeley. It's so good to be home. I've been on the road. It's wonderful to see everyone. Thank you, Mayor Erica. And Davy D, I just want to thank you for being such an important voice in our community for justice and for peace and for compassion. And to Liz Ortega and Barsha and all of our woke young people standing up and speaking out. I'm so proud of them. I want to thank them for being part of today. And last but definitely not least, I just want to say how honored I am to be here today, to be able to welcome a true progressive champion, a remarkable leader, and a dear friend, Senator Bernie Sanders, to my district. I really am thankful for it. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. Introduce him to the most progressive and enlightened congressional district and the wokest district, as I said, in the country. And on November 6th, we're going to prove this again. We're going to knock on doors. We're going to call voters. We're going to use our voice and commute our progressive message to voters. And when we do this and when we vote, we will win. We will win. On November 6th, we have many opportunities throughout the 13th Congressional District to vote our progressive values. We can fund early childhood education and college prep programs for our kids. We can do that. We can protect our communities from wildfires and preserve our parks. We can do that on November 6th. We can ensure that hotel workers are paid fairly and protected from sexual harassment. We can do that. We can provide vital services to the homeless. Yes. And we can make sure that rents are affordable and remain affordable. We've got to do that. We must do that. We can do that November 6th. And so today we're all here to get out the vote and to make sure that in November we elect measures and leaders such as Javanka Beckles, who are bold and diverse and progressive. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do that because we have a stark choice. On the congressional front, and I'm going to tell you, I've been to New Jersey, I've been to Pennsylvania, I've been to Georgia, I've been to North Carolina, I've been to Nevada, I've been to Colorado, going to Texas to help Beto, and back to Colorado and Southern Cal. I know what's going on out there. And I see many of you out there helping us take back the House. I see you doing that. Because we can either return a Republican Congress that's beholden to Wall Street billionaires, polluters, and special interests, or we can elect a Congress that works for the people. Works for the people. So that's what we can do. So you are the revolution that will bring real progressive leadership and policies up and down the ballot. Okay, you can do that. So after you leave today, find candidates and ballot measures that you believe in, sign up for a phone bank this week, walk a precinct, talk to your neighbors. Make sure that every single person you know votes. As Frederick Douglass reminded us, power concedes nothing without demand. You know that. You know that. You know that. So are you fired up and ready to go? Are you fired up and ready to go? Are you fired up and ready to go? All right. Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Berkeley. I am honored and pleased to be here today at this great group of people. Thank you all very much for being here. And thank you for electing one of the great progressive leaders, not only in California, but in the United States of America, my good friend Barbara Lee. Now, I'm here today for one simple reason, and that is we must end one-party reactionary rule in Washington. Four years ago in America, we had the lowest voter turnout in this country since World War II. A lot of working people didn't vote, people of color didn't vote, and young people did not vote in very strong numbers. In fact, throughout this country, almost 2 out of 3 Americans didn't vote. But meanwhile, the Koch brothers and other billionaires poured hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into ugly 30-second political ads. And the result was that Republicans won the House, the Senate, governor's chairs all across this country. In 2014, we had the lowest voter turnout in modern history. In 2018, we must have the highest voter turnout in a midterm election. It is not only imperative that all of you come out and vote, it is not only imperative that you drag your friends and your co-workers and your family members out to vote. Yeah, I know the World Series is important. I got it. But you know what? This midterm election is 1,000 times more important. So tell your friends and your family to turn off the damn television and come out and fight for democracy in this country. And you could do it in any way that you can. You can help people. I have been told by reliable political sources that Barbara will probably squeak out a victory here in Berkeley. And I want her to win an overwhelming victory, but I want you all to do everything that you can to help other candidates all over this state. California can make the difference. And I just want to echo what Barbara said about the terrible tragedy we're reading about in Pittsburgh. All of you will remember. Several years ago, a racist walked into a church in South Carolina and shot people down in cold blood. Today, a racist, as we understand it, walked into a synagogue in Pittsburgh. If this country stands for anything, it has got to stand for the right of people, whether they are Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever they may be. To practice their religion, to live their lives without bigotry, without fear, and certainly within their houses of worship. So the two lessons of Pittsburgh is Barbara is right. We've got to stand up to the gun lobby, and we need common sense gun safety legislation. Guns should not be in the hands of people who should not have them. But even more important, we have got to end that hatred, that bigotry, which is sweeping this country. Like Barbara, I have also been running all over this country. In fact, today is the last day of a 9-state sweep that we have been on. And our message is always the same. It is true that the Koch brothers and the billionaire class has the money, but we have the people. And when people stand up and fight back, we win. And I want to just take a moment to tell you what I have seen with my own eyes and what I have heard just in the last week. Just in the last week as we've gone around this country. I want you to listen to this. We were in Indiana a few days ago, and we were sitting down with workers who had worked at Honeywell Corporation and some other corporations in Indiana. These people were promised health care benefits after they retired. But they were lied to by the corporation, which took away their benefits. And what we are seeing, not just in Indiana, all over this country, corporations that make billions of dollars in profit, corporations that pay their CEOs tens of millions of dollars in compensation, turn their backs on the workers who made their companies great. And our message to corporations is, whether you like it or not, we are going to stop your greed, which is destroying this nation. And then I was in Iowa, sat down, we do large rallies, but before the rallies, we sit down with some folks. And we sat down with a group of people, mostly women. And I talked to a woman, I would guess in her late 20s, a single mom. And she said, Bernie, for 7 years, I have been working at a job as a single mom, and I make $8 an hour. And what we say here, loudly and clearly, is that $8 an hour is a starvation wage. That it is not too much to ask that in America, if you work 40 hours a week, you not live in poverty. And that is why together we're going to raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. Then I went to Colorado, a very beautiful state. Sat down and talked to some people. And they said, Bernie, you may not know this, and I didn't, is that in over half of the school districts in Colorado, children are now on a 4-day-a-week schedule. Can you imagine that? In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, our kids, school districts cannot afford to have kids go to school 5 days a week. And what Barbara Lee has been spending her life fighting for is a change in national priorities. Instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, instead of feeding the military-industrial complex, we're going to make sure that our schools, our public schools, are the best in the world. And then we got to California yesterday. We were in San Diego. And we were on a picket line with Unite Here Local 30. And we stood with the workers who were on strike, who said to Marriott, the wealthiest and largest hotel conglomeration in the world, pay your workers a decent wage. And last night we were in Oceanside. And we were at Maricosta Community College, beautiful campus. And before we went on to do the rally, and it was a great turnout there, but before we did the rally, spoke to an administrator at the school. And she said, Bernie, you may not know this, but we have a food pantry on campus. I said, what does that mean? Why do you have a food pantry on campus? Because many of the students at that community college are food insecure. They don't know where they're going to get their next meal, and many of them do not have housing. They live in temporary housing, sleeping on people's couches. Can you imagine that in the year 2018, we have college students who are hungry and do not have permanent housing? And that is what this election is about. And as we drove through Oakland and Berkeley just this morning, you know this, but I'm from Vermont, I didn't know this. You got 10 cities right here. We got millions of workers ready to go to work to build the affordable housing we need all over America. This is America. We don't need veterans and working people sleeping out in the streets. And I'm very proud, Barbara and I, many years ago, worked together to pass what is probably the most significant low-income housing program in recent history. It's pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into low-income housing, but clearly that is not enough. And when we talk about rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, it's not just bridges, it is not just roads, it is not just water systems or airports or wastewater plants. When we talk about infrastructure, it is building millions of units of affordable housing in America. Just in my own state, there was a poll that was done recently. The results surprised me. We asked people in Vermont, it's true all over the country, what is the most significant financial stress that you are facing? And I thought it would be healthcare, but that's right. It was affordable housing. How do you put a roof over your head if you're making 10, 12 bucks an hour and you're spending 50% of your income in housing? How do you buy the food you need? How do you put gas in your car? Affordable housing is a major crisis, not just in California, but in Vermont, all over this country. It is an issue we must deal with. Now, I know that Donald Trump is not terribly popular in the state of California. Thank you, California. And given the fact that Trump and his friends are attacking California every day, you guys must be doing something right. Thank you, California. But I want to say a word to the minority of folks in California who voted for Trump. And this is what I want to say. During his campaign in 2016, Trump said a whole lot of things which on the surface sounded reasonable. The only problem is that this guy is a pathological liar. And it doesn't matter what he says, because the next day he's going to change his view. When Trump ran for president, you all may recall, he said, I'm going to provide health care to everybody. Well, I believe that. Barbara believes that. You believe that. Turned out, though, he lied. And when he became president, he helped lead the effort to throw 32 million Americans off of the health care they have. And thank God in the Senate, with the vote of the late John McCain, we were able to defeat that proposal by one vote. During his campaign, Trump said that we have got to take on the pharmaceutical industry and lower the cost of prescription drugs. He's right. That's what we should do. Unfortunately, he lied again, and over the last 2 years, prescription drug costs in California and throughout this country have soared. Now, I know just the other day, 8 days before an election, he came up with his idea about how to deal with the high cost of prescription drugs. And if you believe that he will carry that out, we got a great bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. And during his campaign, Trump said to the people of Vermont and California, he said, look, I'm a different type of Republican. Trust me. I'm not going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Well, he introduced his budget, called for $1 trillion cut in Medicaid. And by the way, let us be clear, not only would this be devastating for low-income and working families and for the children, but for all of you who have parents or loved ones in nursing homes, who do you think's paying that bill right now? It's Medicaid. And you cut $1 trillion off of Medicaid in order to give tax breaks to billionaires. The middle class of this country is going to be left with a high bill that many families simply cannot afford. Thank you. Thank you. And then just last week or 2 weeks ago, I mean, it's always hard to keep track of Trump's lies. I mean, they come fast and furious. But a couple of weeks ago, he told a lie which has not only consequences for our country, but for the whole world. And he said, you know, in terms of climate change, well, there are differences of opinion. Lie. The scientific community is 99% united in telling us, now I understand that for a president who doesn't believe in science, whose scientific information comes from Fox TV, it might be hard to appreciate, but 99% of the scientists believe, as is the case, that climate change is real, it is man-made, it is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And some of you may have seen, and I suspect that Donald Trump did not, but there was a recent 700-page report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Some of you see that? And what that report said, and this report was a summary of thousands of studies all over the world. And what this report stated should scare the bejesus out of every person in the world. And what that report said is we got 12 years. 12 years is not a long period of time. 12 years to substantially reduce carbon emissions. 12 years to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. 12 years in order to make sure that we leave to our children and our grandchildren a planet that is healthy and is habitable. And it really is unspeakable, unspeakably selfish that we have a president and a fossil fuel industry who are more concerned about their short-term profits than the well-being of our kids and our grandchildren and the future of this planet. And whether Trump likes it or not, we are going to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. We know that this issue is not only a climate change issue. You want low-cost electricity? Let's move to solar in a very aggressive way. You want to create millions of good-paying jobs, good-paying union jobs? Then let us move aggressively to sustainable energy. Donald Trump, likes to consider himself a tough guy, really tough guy. He is so tough that he has allowed his agents at the southern border to rip little babies out of the arms of their mothers. And we say to Donald Trump, that's not being tough, that is moral cowardice. And we say to Donald Trump, if you're such a tough guy, why do you collapse in front of Vladimir Putin, who's trying to destroy American democracy? And Trump thinks he's a tough guy, really tough, by cutting back on the WIC program, which provides nutrition for low-income pregnant women. Man, whoa, boy, how tough can you be? But when it comes to standing up to the dictator of Saudi Arabia, who had a journalist dissident killed, he's not so tough in that regard. And let me take a moment now to thank the millions of people, I guess your state is so large that we use different numbers, who helped us out in the 2016 Democratic presidential primary. We didn't win here, but we came pretty close. But we did win 22 states. We did win 13 million votes. And maybe most importantly, we won more votes from young people, black and white and Latino and Native American and Asian American, than Clinton and Trump combined. And as a result of your help and the help we received all over this country, turned out that the ideas we were talking about 3 years ago here in California, which seemed so radical, so fringy, so extreme, they are now part of the mainstream conversation. And in fact are being implemented in states and cities all across this country. Three years ago, we said that if we don't get our act together, this country is going to become an oligarchy with a handful of billionaires controlling our political and economic life. And the American people are catching on. Whether you're conservative or progressive, you understand that we cannot continue a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires to buy elections. And that together we are going to overturn this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United and move the public funding of elections. And overwhelmingly, the American people understand that when you have three of the wealthiest people in America, three people owning more wealth than the bottom half of our population, when you got the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%, when you got over 40% of all new income created today going to the top 1%. The American people understand that it is a moral imperative that we deal with this obscene level of income and wealth inequality. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, during the course of this year, has seen his wealth increase hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. And yet we have people sleeping out on the streets of Berkeley. We are going to change those priorities. We are not going to give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. We're going to demand that they start paying their fair share of taxes. Three years ago, when we talked about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that was considered to be a radical idea. Not anymore. California has done it. New York has done it. Cities all over America are doing it. And we told Amazon and their multi-billion-dollar owner they got to do it as well. And they did. And a few years ago, when we said that in this moment in American history, when almost all of the new, decent-paying jobs require a higher education, college or post-high school training, and we said that we have got to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, well, that was considered a radical idea. Not anymore. All over the country, we are now seeing cities and states understand that young people should not leave college $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. And maybe the most important issue where we have achieved real success, and on this one I want to thank the National Nurses United Union. Three years ago, we said that health care is a right, not a privilege. We said that it is an international embarrassment that our great country is the only major nation on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. I live 40 miles from the Canadian border in Burlington. They got health care for all. Europe has health care for all. If every other major country on earth understands that health care is a human right, here in the United States, we are going to do the same. And the American people understand, despite the power of the drug companies and the insurance companies, they understand that there's something fundamentally wrong with a system in which today 30 million people have no health insurance. Even more are underinsured with high deductibles and copayments. A nation in which we pay, by far, the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. You want to hear crazy? Crazy is that 1 out of 5 Americans who go to their doctors and get a prescription cannot afford to fill that prescription. That's crazy. And at the end of all of that, we end up paying twice as much per capita health care as do the people of any other country. And what the American people now understand is that we have got to expand Medicare to cover all of us through a Medicare for All single-payer program. Think about what it means to your life that when you or your kids get sick, you go to the doctor when you have to go to the doctor and not worry about the cost of that visit. Think about what it means if, God forbid, you end up in a hospital and the bill is $100,000. You don't have to worry about financial ruin for your family. You got to worry about getting well. And all over this country in the last 3 years, people have been thinking about just these issues. The last poll that I have seen just came out the other day. 70% of the American people support a Medicare for All single-payer program. When I introduced that bill in the Senate a few years ago, we had one great sponsor, me. This time we have 15 co-sponsors. And in the House, there are well over 100 members of Congress being led by Barbara and other great members of the Congress who are going to bring us health care for all. And when we talk about the important issues facing America, I have a hard time dealing with my right-wing colleagues who tell us that they want to see government get off the backs of the people. They want to see deregulation of everything. They want people to be able to control their own lives, except when it comes to the right of a woman to control her own body. So we say to those hypocrites, get the government out of the bodies of the women of America. And there is another issue that I know you in California are helping to lead us in, and that is the understanding that today we have a criminal justice system that is not only broken, but racist. And we know that there is something profoundly wrong when we have more people in jail in this country, disproportionately African American, Latino, Native American. We have more people in jail than China or any other country on earth. And we know that as part of that broken criminal justice system has been the grotesquely failed so-called war on drugs. God only knows how many Hundreds of thousands of lives have been ruined by people who receive police records for the possession of marijuana. And I'm very proud that in my state of Vermont and here in California, we are making progress by legalizing possession of marijuana and in other parts decriminalizing it. Many of you may not know this, but when we talk about criminal justice, as we speak, out of the 2 million people who are in jail, 400,000 of those people are in jail for the crime of being poor and not being able to afford cash bail. In other words, we still have, for all intent and purposes, debtors' prisons in the United States of America. And I congratulate California for helping to lead the effort to do away with cash bail. And another area where I know your state is active is understanding that we will not allow Trump and his friends to demonize immigrants. And for me, this is a bit personal, because I am a first-generation American. My dad came to this country from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket and very little education. America welcomed him. And right now, Barbara and I, many other members of Congress, have been working hard to make sure that the 1.8 million young people in the DACA program or eligible for DACA get the legal protection that they need. And more important, that this Congress passes comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship for the undocumented in America. And by the way, I want you all to know this. This is not Barbara Lee's point of view or my point of view or your point of view. This is what the American people want. The last poll that I saw, 80% of the American people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, support legal protection for the young people in DACA. Brothers and sisters, my disagreements with Trump are many. They deal with the economy and tax breaks for billionaires. They deal with health care and his desire to throw 32 million people off the health insurance they have. Deals with the environment and his refusal to acknowledge the reality of climate change. It deals with women's rights and is pushing hard to take away a woman's right to control her own body. Deals with immigration. You name the issue. But there is something that goes even deeper in Trump that I detest. And that is that historically in this country, when you have a president, whether that president is conservative or liberal, that president understands that his sacred duty as a president is to bring our people together, not divide us up. And I want you to remember this. Please remember this. I was no great fan of George W. Bush. Disagreed with him on everything, including the damn war in Iraq. All right? But here you have a guy who was a very conservative president. Do you remember what he did a few days after the 9/11 attack? He went to a mosque. George W. Bush, President of the United States, went to a Muslim mosque. And what he said to the American people is, criminals and terrorists attacked our country, not the Muslim people. And that was a conservative president. And now we are at a painful moment in our history where we have a president of the United States, and what he says reverberates all over the world, who is trying to divide us up by the color of our skin, by the country we come from, by our sexual orientation, or by our religion, or even by our gender. Now, everybody in this country knows that in our history as a nation, we have done some extraordinary things that we are deeply proud of, and we have done some things that we're not so proud of. We understand that when the settlers first came to North America, the terrible things they did to the Native American people. We know that, and we know the attacks that still take place against Native Americans. We all know the abomination of slavery and segregation and racism. We know that 100 years ago in America, please don't forget this, women did not have the right to vote. They were third-class citizens. Women could not go to get the education they wanted or get the jobs they wanted. If they were divorced, they lost the possessions that they had. We know that throughout the history of this country, our gay brothers and sisters suffered incredible pain because they could not be honest about their sexuality. We understand that throughout the history of this country, there has been terrible prejudice against Asians. You remember the Asian Expulsion Act? There has been prejudice against Catholics, against Irish, Italians, Jews, you name it. And yet throughout all of those terrible moments, something else was going on. And that is, from day one, brave people put their lives on the line to make it clear that no matter what the color of our skin, we share a common humanity. That all of us, whether we're black or white or Latino, Asian, Native American, whether we're gay or straight, male or female, all of us have a vision that we want our kids to have a good education, to breathe clean air, to have a good job, to live in a world of peace, not war. That is our vision. And today we say to Donald Trump and his friends, this country has struggled with discrimination for too many years. We have fought back for too many years. And what we say to Trump, we are not going backwards toward more discrimination. We are going forward to create a nation that belongs to all of us equally. Brothers and sisters, I want to leave you with this message that on virtually every issue that I've talked about this afternoon, and many others that I haven't, the vast majority of the American people are on our side. Very few people believe we should give tax breaks to billionaires and then cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But our views, what you believe and what I believe, don't matter unless we elect people who stand with us. Next week, the most important midterm election in the modern history of this country will be taking place. Please do everything you can to make sure we win it. Thank you all very much.
Didn't know what time it was.